Om Tat Sat. My humble prostrations to the all-pervading Brahman, to my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayanandaji Maharaj, to sage Narada and all sages and saints, and to each of you divine soul watching today's satsang. We are studying Narada Bhakti Sutras. We are on chapter number 3, which is primary and secondary devotion, and we will be studying Sutra number 57 today. Commentary is by my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayanandaji, narrated by myself, Swami Nikhilananda. So let's get started. Sutra number 57. We will be covering it in two parts, today and tomorrow. So Sutra 57 is Uttar Asmad Purva Apurva Shreyaya Bhavati. Again, Uttar Asmad Purva Shreyaya Bhavati. Meaning, of these three classifications mentioned in the previous sutra, each prior type is better than the one succeeding it, being conducive to the highest good. So let us explain the one part of it. The previous sutra that Sage Narada had stated that there are two classifications of secondary devotion according to the gunas and according to the Gita. With respect to the gunas, remember we had discussed there is a sattvic, rajasic and tamasic. Three kinds of gunas and three kinds of devotees also. So with respect to the guna, the rajasic devotee is better than the tamasic one, and the sattvic one is better than the rajasic and tamasic devotee also. So with respect to those categories of secondary devotion in the Gita, the seeker of knowledge, there are four kinds: arth, Artharthi, Jigyasu and Jnani. So the Artharthi is better than the one who's always asking for God when he needs something, and then when he gets it, he forgets about God. Then again he needs something, he remembers, oh yes, there is God, we should ask him. And then he asks again, and then he forgets again. So that is the lowest class of devotee. Then there is the Artharthi who is normally handling the things, but who's always praying for more and more wealth and material comforts and things like that. That is better than the Arti, but below the Jigyasu. Jigyasu is one who is not asking God for these material things, but he is asking for increasing his knowledge and gaining more and more devotion and wisdom, those kind of things. And he is better than both the Arti and the Artharthi, but then he has not yet achieved self-realization, so he is below the Jnani. That is the essence of this, that the Bhagavad Gita aspect of Arti, Artharthi, Jigyasu and Jnani that is being expressed here. And many commentators interpret Artha, which is distressed, as a sentimental form of devotion, in which case this form of devotion becomes the lowest of the three. So as we just discussed, but according to these commentaries, there is a difference in the bhakti. So in the bhakti movement, the way Sage Narada is talking about Artha, devotees under the sentimental distress, they turn to God for help. So there is a difference in how Artha in bhakti movement looks at God. He feels the pain and he is connected to God from that angle. There is a different meaning. It refers to a devotee who has discovered God to be the only sustenance of his life. So he doesn't know anybody other than God. So obviously, just like a child who runs to his mother, this devotee runs to God. So this is not to be taken literally as the way Bhagavad Gita is explaining the term Artha. This is why spirituality is complex and it has to be handled in a very introspective way and under proper guidance. Otherwise, people can read the same terms and interpret them very differently. So this is where the Artha means you are totally dependent on God in the bhakti movement. So he who turns to God for wealth, as we said, is Artharthi and all that. So a classic illustration of an Artha Bhakta, we will discuss this wonderful story. This comes from the Mahabharata. It is about the Draupadi Chirhanan. It is actually quite mysterious and painful, and as well as with a great end result. So those of who don't know Mahabharata, there are two forces. Kauravas are the forces of evil, and Pandavas are the forces of good, virtuous people. So Pandavas were 5 brothers, and Kauravas were 100, and they were being ruled by their father, King Dhritarashtra. So this is the story, but we'll cover it very shortly here. But just to give you the essence, that the evil brothers want to take away the kingdom of the good brothers, and they keep on giving them difficult situations. So they come up with a plot of gambling, because Yudhishthir, he is one of the Pandavas. He liked gambling, and he had received, they had divided their kingdom, and he had part of the kingdom which the Kauravas wanted to somehow, by playing poker, it's like called Chaucer, but the game of dice, they wanted to invite him to gambling, and therefore by treachery win his kingdom, which they did. So when they were playing, he went there and he first wagered his kingdom, his wealth, then he wagered his 5 brothers, and then even his wife Draupadi, and he lost her. But he was also called Dharmaraj, or the follower of dharma, of ethical principles. So therefore, since he had lost his wife, he had no claim over her. She was mistreated, because Duryodhana and his younger brother Dushashana, they had some bad feelings towards Draupadi. So they drag her down into the courthouse in front of their fathers and all these kings and gurus, and all the Pandavas are sitting, and she is mistreated, and they are trying to disrobe her in front of the whole sabha, in the whole courtship. And the idea is to humiliate her, because she had humiliated Duryodhan, the crown prince of the bad side. So he wanted to put her down and put her to shame, while her 5 husbands, the Pandavas, watched and could do nothing. So they start disrobing her, and then she tries to protect herself, but knowing that nobody can come to her rescue, she cries, yells at all the people, but nobody can help. And then she eventually then turns up her hands in desperation to Krishna, and she says, "Oh Krishna, save me." And he does. So basically, because he is God in human form, he so when Dushashana is pulling her sari is a garment that people wear, that women wear around their body. And so when he's pulling it, Lord Krishna's grace falls upon Draupadi, and the sari becomes endless. So the more he pulls, the more it comes. So 6 yards of sari that she had becomes thousands of yards. Eventually he gets tired, he cannot pull anymore. And then they see what the challenge is, or how it is so powerful that all the might of their kingdom and these people could do nothing in front of Lord's grace. So therefore, this is an example where Draupadi was an Artha Bhakta. So she cried in pain, and God came to her help. The same kind of story also comes in Gajendra Moksh, where the elephant is caught by a crocodile, and in the end, he, after using all his strength, all his power, he doesn't know what to do. He cries to God, and then comes the chakra, Sudarshan chakra of Lord Vishnu, and cuts off the crocodile's head, and Gajendra, the elephant king, is freed from that turbulence that he had been experiencing for so long. So these are the examples to show some of the examples from history and other examples that we are discussing, to show what an Artha Bhakta is. So whereas this is not to be confused with the Artha in the Bhagavad Gita, as we talked about, because there they are asking for worldly things. Oh God, I'm in pain, do this, and then you forget about God, then you remember him again. But not so in Bhakti Yoga. In Bhakti Yoga, it's always like an undercurrent, and then he is your soul protector. So the story implies that as long as Draupadi was leaning upon her husband's on her own effort to save herself, she was unable to receive divine grace. Krishna did not come till she gave everything up. But the moment she surrendered all her external supports and turned to God in a state of profound distress, she received an immediate response from God. Because he's everywhere. It doesn't take him time. He doesn't have to travel anywhere. He's everywhere. In the same way, when an aspirant realizes the vanity of all worldly supports and turns to God through Artha Bhakti, he is close to unfolding supreme devotion. Therefore, Artha Bhakti is the highest form in the secondary devotion. It's still secondary, but it's very, very high. It's a high state. And I hope you could see the distinction between these two interesting shlokas in the Bhagavad Gita and also in the Narada Bhakti Sutras. So we will be covering part 2 of this sutra tomorrow. Om Tat Sat.